The current banking crisis in America is spreading overseas, so it's becoming international. I've got a few clips of interviews that I watched and I liked in the last few days that I want to show you in this video about the banking crisis. Plus, you guys know the movie The Big Short. The character played by Steve Carell, his name is Steve Eisman. I've got a couple of interview clips that I really think you should see, and I put them in this video as well. And lastly, I also want to talk a little bit about the assault on Taiwan. And what I thought would be best for you guys is if I took all of these interviews and sliced them down and took out everything, every frame you don't need to see, and I've gotten hours and hours of videos and I've taken them down to very specific parts that I really want you to see that I think will benefit you.
This morning, there are growing concerns over a banking crisis after the fall of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank.
And it's not just here in the U.S. Depositors overseas are also worried about the security of their money after more banking troubles in Europe.
Do you see any sort of a banking crisis unfolding here in the United States and or in Europe?
What is really happening beneath the surface of the choppy waves at this hour? And will it all force our Federal Reserve to pause its interest rate hikes at its meeting 1 week from today?
The United States will go to war if necessary in order to protect Taiwan.
For many of you, it's your first time here. My name is Peter Leeds, and along with my entire team, we publish the world-famous Stock Pick newsletter. We've been in business doing exactly this for over 25 years, and we've got subscribers from 6 different continents.
And fundamentally, the Chinese now have the capability to take out all our communications and space capabilities across the entire spectrum of space. The use of space and communications in the military at the moment is absolutely critical.
China now has more than 360 satellites orbiting the Earth.
The Chinese are rehearsing and practicing this all the time, taking out the world's, not just the Americans, the world's satellites up there. They're rehearsing this all the time. If they took out the world's satellites, the undersea cables, if they attacked American military bases, which are not fortified in the American bases around Taiwan, then there is nothing the Americans can do.
The Swiss bank Credit Suisse announced yesterday it will borrow nearly $54 billion from the Swiss central bank to shore up liquidity, and it will seek to repurchase debt. The troubled bank is hoping those moves boost investor confidence.
Number one, the large U.S. banks are better capitalized and have less risk than they ever had in anyone's lifetime. The European banks, while they're not as well capitalized, are certainly better capitalized than they are. That isn't to say there won't be pain if Credit Suisse goes down, but it's not an 08, thankfully.
Could the two superpowers go to war over a balloon?
This was clearly in breach of America's airspace, and that's the fundamental thing. Whatever it was doing, it was in American airspace and it didn't have permission to be there.
The giant Chinese balloon that floated across America and was taken down over the Atlantic Ocean is further evidence that war is just a hair trigger away.
Shares started plunging earlier this week. Its biggest investor, the Saudi National Bank, could not invest more in the bank.
Would it be World War III? Would we be talking about World War III? I think it would be. Oh, yeah.
A conflict between the United States and China would be nothing short of catastrophic.
And there was concern. Shares plunged 30% yesterday. They've rebounded. Why? Because Credit Suisse is taking that $54 billion loan from the Saudi National Bank, the Swiss National Bank, I should say.
If the company goes bankrupt, there will be losses. It's not death-defying losses, but it'll be a problem. It's not going to take down the system.
I don't think we're going to see a 1944 D-Day style invasion by China of Taiwan. The Chinese could win it, but it would cost them dearly, and their military capability would be severely hit by the American forces that sit in South Korea, Japan, Guam, Alaska, and Diego Garcia.
Like, there is still plenty of panic among traders over here because Credit Suisse is really a Lehman moment. It is too big to fail.
The Chinese PLA has 975,000 troops. how long realistically could you hold them off?
And as always, I've got links to every one of these interviews in the description below this video, so if you see something that tickles your fancy, you might want to go down and check out the entire interview that I got that clip from.
We've got a time period now where we must prepare for the worst case.
We would probably be looking at losses that we haven't seen since the Second World War.
But this is one headline after the other that says there is trouble in the banking sector, and now it's spread overseas.
And that is the reason that now, only now, we are hearing from the government, from the Swiss government, which has pretty much agreed, let's just say that, to provide its support.
This entire video is inspired by the wonderful support of the Peter Leeds Army. I love you guys. Shout out to all the Peter Leeds Army members. And the very end of the video is dedicated to Smitty for this comment that he sent in. We'll get to that at the very end of the video.
Because we've fundamentally been at peace for 80 years, many people find a serious war beyond their comprehension. Ask the Ukrainians. And people have often said to me, China wouldn't be that stupid, would they? Ask the Russians.
It's a little bit of what I'd call PTSD from 2008. You know, sell and ask questions later, which is not a bad strategy because the news is probably just going to get worse.
The
year 2027 holds great significance for President Xi. It will be the 100th anniversary of the People's Liberation Army. It could also see him re-elected to an unprecedented fourth term as leader.
And I suggest that as you watch each of these clips, you keep in mind things like that we talk about on this channel all the time: contagion, follow-on effects, counterparty risk, bailouts, and uncertainty. How I always tell you that uncertainty is worse for the stock market than even bad news. Keep all of those concepts in mind as you see each of these clips, because a lot of these clips I put in there just to try and display what we've been talking about all this time.
So the European banks, not just Credit Suisse, have really stumbled. Earlier today, we can show the ones that are American depository receipts, meaning they're European banks that trade here in the U.S. We're talking about everyone from Deutsche Bank, BNP Paribas. You can put up HSBC. There are many of them. What is the latest, though? When you say support, are we talking about a bailout, a full-out rescue by the Swiss National Bank?
We looked at Credit Suisse today. Credit Suisse balance sheet is 500 billion. The GDP of Switzerland is 800 billion. So could Switzerland do something? Yeah, they could do something. It's not going to be easy. Not easy at all. The other thing I would say about Switzerland, unfortunately, is they really don't have a lot of regulators. So what they actually know is not, I don't think they know a lot.
That's frightening.
We need to learn from what has just happened with these banks and go forward by tightening the regulations. It's just that simple.
Among his many stated goals, taking back Taiwan.
The resolution of the Taiwan issue is a Chinese matter for us Chinese people to decide. We insist on striving for the prospect of peaceful reunification with the greatest sincerity and with the greatest effort. However, we are not committed to abandoning the use of force.
Nothing in this video is intended as personalized trading advice for you.
But that statement paired with the notion that Credit Suisse might be too big to save is sort of a frightening.
Well, it's frightening and it's not franking. It's going to be ugly.
Right.
You know, Credit Suisse, I'll say euphemistically, has been a problem child in the investment banking industry for as long as I can remember. And it's always had cultural issues. But, it'll get unwound. It'll be painful. It's only going to be painful for Switzerland.
If the ECB continues to raise rates, and then we have our own Fed meeting next week, and the Fed continues to raise rates, rising rates has been part of the problem here of these banks' balance sheets. So that's one pivotal thing to watch.
All the European major banks, they are so much intertwined with each other and then holding balance from one bank to another bank. So the exposure is absolutely mammoth.
Speaking of which, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We got so many great videos like this just pumping out now all the time.
Up until, I guess, before the fall of SVB, the Federal Reserve was obdurately opposed to halting its interest rate hike trajectory. Will it one day from today be forced to pause?
She has become a leader who has basically developed the goal that China is going to become the predominant power in the world.
So, what did the best over the last 10 years? High growth tech stocks. And what did the best within high growth tech stocks? Super high growth revenue stocks with negative earnings. Okay, so what did the worst last year? Super high growth stocks with negative earnings.
I mean, a lot of this began, if not all of this began, with the failure of Silicon Valley Bank, SVB. I think there are a lot of idiosyncratic issues at work that made SVB the most likely, if not the only bank to suffer the fate along the line. Not to say that Signature it didn't also fail, because it did, but what affected SVB ignited these concerns that who's the next one? Who else has unrealized losses? Who else is negative equity if you account for all the off-balance sheet items?
I think when the house is on fire, it's appropriate to calm things down, not to increase interest rates at this very moment, but the long-term inflation fight is still on. So after a short pause to calm the waves, then the Federal Reserve has to combat inflation, which is still running at a very high rate, 3 times at what the Federal Reserve wants it to run. I would like to be down to 0.
Who's outperformed over the last 10 years? Tech investors. The group is now so volatile, I think everybody should take their exposures down. Not that you should invest in tech at all, but you really should diversify more of your portfolio, take down your risk, manage your risk, tailor your portfolios to your clients. One size does not fit all.
On Formosa, renamed Taiwan, nationalist China is ready.
Taiwan separated from communist China in 1949, and it's been a fraught and uncertain relationship ever since.
Have made communist China an emerging superpower.
Now, it's potentially the greatest flashpoint in global politics, and one that could have the greatest impact on the rest of the world.
People are rushing to take their money out of their own bank and put it in some of the bigger banks. I'm not saying that that's totally imprudent, but what I am saying is some of the worst fears in the market right now are probably unlikely to be realized.
The fact that we all thought that he would be a much more responsible leader in China and has turned out to be much more autocratic has raised real concerns about the predictability of where he wants to go.
The Fed won't be raising rates because it's scared. Well, if the Fed is scared, you should be scared. On the other hand, if the Fed raises rates even in the face of this by 25 basis points and says that we still could raise more, then that's like, wait a minute, you're sort of caught between a rock and a hard place. Financial conditions have really tightened, but you still have inflation.
The Federal Reserve had moved rates so quickly after having been down so long, and I think it's important to point out, German bonds, German treasuries, as they are known, the Bunds, had been yielding negative, meaning the government would pay you just to hold your money.
Xi Jinping has said expressly that he wants Taiwan to be part of Greater China now. How do you think he'd do it? How do you think he'd take it?
Well, he said it on many, many occasions. I mean, people talk about grey zone warfare. There's nothing grey in his statements. They're very black and white. He wants Taiwan back, and he wants to do it in his lifetime. It's his manifest destiny in many respects.
I mean, let's talk about next week, for example. At the beginning of the year, good news was good, bad news was bad. And then in February, good news was bad news was good.
It is absolutely humongous, but one thing that is quite different between the Federal Reserve and the ECB is that the ECB is still very much in early stages of increasing those interest rates at the fastest pace that the Federal Reserve has done.
That destiny rests on Xi reigning supreme in China. On the eve of the party congress that re-elected him, former Chinese leader Hu Jintao was removed from the event, seen by many as another power play by the president.
I said that Monday. It continues to do so. On the right-hand side of your screen, you can see that Credit Suisse has just fallen a bit from the $2 a share. Once again, that we started the hour at, it's at $1.98 at the moment. You know, it's such a cheap and battered stock that equals a drop of 21%.
Do I think the banking sector is still a short? Well, it's imploded. So, I mean, would you want to short some of the bank stocks after some of them are down 60, 70%?
Xi Jinping assumed his presidency in the third term in a process that is not transparent. And he basically tried to eliminate all his political opponents.
So let's switch to the U.S. for a minute. So with what's happened over the last week that's been revealed, and who knows what hasn't been revealed yet, do you see that we're in a new era now for regional banks, for what the model will be and how to think about the whole banking structure, the whole sort of business of banking?
In this world, there's only one China, and now the People's Republic of China is representing the whole of China. And Taiwan was part of China and is still part of China.
The Federal Reserve has liabilities of about $8.6 trillion. It has assets of 7.4, and so it has a negative net worth of about $1.1 trillion because it did exactly the same as Silicon Valley Bank did. Or let's put it the other way around. Silicon Valley Bank did exactly what the Federal Reserve did. And therefore, they both took the losses as interest rates went up, but prices went down.
Office real estate is going to be a problem.
This bank's not going to fail without government support, Credit Suisse.
Okay.
This has been a slow motion locomotive for the better part of a year or two or even more. The stock was 15, then it was 7, and now it's 2. So it's not as if everybody's not aware of problems in many European banks.
Joseph Wu is Taiwan's foreign minister.
In this moment, how are relations between Taiwan and China? Not very good. You can probably flashback to August when Speaker Pelosi visited Taiwan and the Chinese just reacted disproportionately through its military might. They also fired the missiles over Taiwan, and they also conducted disinformation campaign, cognitive warfare, and also economic coercion against Taiwan.
But you know, the credit default swaps blew out to like 800 basis points. That means you really can't fund yourselves. I heard that they were offering 6 to 7% deposit rates in Asia, and people were still pulling their money. And nobody will be a counterparty anymore. That's more than bad.
Yeah.
That's
Really bad. So how Switzerland will deal this, it's anybody's guess. I'm not in the room.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're talking about Credit Suisse right now. The idea that Credit Suisse would be allowed to quote unquote fail without the Swiss national government stepping in some capacity is, I would argue, farcical.
Taiwan has a population of 24 million. China, 1.4 billion. And the two are just 160 kilometers apart, separated by one of the most important shipping lanes in the world, the Taiwan Strait.
And now let's talk about next week. So, I mean, the 50 basis points is off the table. So either they're going to do 25 basis points or they're going to do nothing.
Recently, there has been a shift in tone from President Xi Jinping. What do you put that down to? He said several things. The first thing is that the Chinese officials, especially the foreign policy officials, need to dare to struggle. And to us, that seems to be quite alarming.
Even if Silicon Valley had been in the stress test, given what the stress test says, I don't think the regulators would have caught it.
They would have passed it.
And, you know, the stress test is basically fighting the last battle. That battle has been won in the large banks. They're better capitalized. Their risk, even with that capital, is much narrower.
And he also put it in his work report. The Taiwan belongs to the Chinese people. And he also said that China would never promise to renounce the use of force against Taiwan. So if you put all this together, China seems to be preparing for a military assault against Taiwan.
This is not just speculation on the part of Joseph Wu. He points to the dramatic increase in China's military presence in Taiwanese territory.
If you look at China's long-term military trajectory, it's been threatening Taiwan more and more and more. In 2020, they have about 380 sorties of their military airplane. And in 2021, they had 970 of them. And for this year, they already have 2,700 sorties violating our immediate vicinity. So this kind of military threat is increasing.
The stress test that they had would not have detected their problem.
And we are concerned that China might feel that they are confident enough to use military force against Taiwan without too much opposition. And if they have that kind of confidence, they may attack Taiwan at any time.
Some of the regional banks, especially those that have a lot of deposits above 250, bought long-term bonds at very, very low levels and have massive mark-to-market losses. That's why Silicon Valley failed. Also, they failed because they had a very, very concentrated type of deposit base, which has a very big herd mentality.
We've been patiently waiting for more than 7 decades, and we've been waiting peacefully for peaceful relocation.
Because given what's just happened, all the regulations are probably going to get much more stringent, making the banks much less profitable, and that's not going to be clear for many, many months. So why be a hero? Because you have absolutely no idea what's going to happen.
If it comes down to urban warfare, how long realistically could you hold them off? We don't try to calculate how long we can last. The determination is that we will fight as long as it takes.
Okay, I think what's happening is we're moving from one paradigm to another paradigm. So the paradigm of the last several years has been rates are very low, you're paid to take risk, and you're actually paid to take a lot of risk.
Would U.S. forces defend the island?
Yes, if in fact there was an unprecedented attack.
So unlike Ukraine, to be clear, sir, U.S. forces, U.S. men and women, would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion?
Yes.
Well, President Biden has made very clear that the United States would in fact move to defend Taiwan and deploy our military forces into Taiwan in order to protect them. I think that pretty much makes clear that the United States will in fact go to war if necessary in order to protect Taiwan.
The United States plays a major strategic role in the Indo-Pacific. With 375,000 personnel, there's a vast network of operations that extend from Hawaii all the way to India. Jim Molan believed China's first course of action would be to aim big. Combining its 1 million troops with other personnel, China has over 2 million. America, around 1.4 million. There's Pine Gap, the spy station that's believed to provide signals intelligence and early warning on missile launches. In WA, the radar facility near Exmouth provides critical communication links to US and Australian naval forces in the Indo-Pacific.
We will increase rotational presence of U.S. forces in Australia. That includes rotations of bomber task forces, fighters, and future rotations of U.S. Navy and U.S. Army capabilities.
At the end of the day, a conflict between the United States and China would be nothing short of catastrophic. It would not be a short war, and we should be very clear about that.
The least thing we're ready to do is to use force. And that is one of the reasons why China has been so patient. But we can never rule out our option to use other means. So when necessary, when compelled, we are ready to use all necessary means. As to what does it mean by all necessary means, you can use your imagination.
And as promised, this part of the video is inspired by Smitty. Thank you for sending in this comment. And After you sent it, I went and took another look myself at the 1929 stock market crash video, and it is eerie to see all the ways in which everything's lining up today exactly as it did just before the big stock market crash of 1929. For many of you, it's your first time here. My name is Peter Leeds, and along with my entire team, we publish the world-famous Stock Pick newsletter. We've been in business doing exactly this for over 25 years, and we've got subscribers from 6 different continents.